Welcome to AP U.S. History. We're going to be looking at the Federalist era, which begins after the founding of the new Constitution up to the turn of the century. Um, this period is covered in parts of Chapter 8 and Chapter 9, so it's kind of a combination of both. The Federalists, again, were the group of people who believed in a stronger central government, and that's the way it was adopted in the new Constitution in 1787, and then later unanimously ratified by all the states. And our new government will officially start in 1789. And we've had this Constitution from that point on. As far as domestic policies were concerned, in 1790, we have about 4 million people. These are some statistics. 90% of the people lived on farms. Small percentage lived beyond the Allegheny Mountains, the Appalachian Mountains. Finances for the new nation were unstable. Had a huge foreign debts and domestic debts. We seem to be challenged by the British and also the French and also the Spanish. No one really respects us because we have such a small army and navy. Certainly a lot of Native American unrest on the frontier, agitated, encouraged by the British. Industry was a slow go, but it was growing. You have to understand that we're primarily an agricultural country. We've lived off the British imports, the manufactured goods, prior to the Revolutionary War and after the Revolutionary War. Most of the manufacturing is going to be done in the northern part of America. Washington's administration, he's going to be our first president. He's going to serve for 8 years. He was elected by the Electoral College, not by the popular vote. There were no political parties at this time. In fact, George Washington will warn against political parties when he leaves office. His cabinet, there was no cabinet mentioned in the Constitution, but a cabinet will be created, and there will be 4 members during his tenure as president to give him advice in foreign policy and domestic policies. The cabinet really becomes an integral part of the executive branch, part of the unwritten Constitution. And Washington will consult this members, set the precedent for helping the president make executive decisions. This shows the breakdown of the electoral vote. John Adams being the person who got the second most. At that point, if you got the second most electoral votes, you were considered the vice president. In terms of other electoral votes, this was in 1792. You can see the breakdown there. Again, John Adams receiving the second highest, and he would become the vice president. Again, no political parties. Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson will advise the President on foreign affairs. Secretary of Treasury Alexander Hamilton on domestic financing. Secretary Henry Knox will be the Secretary of War, and the Attorney General would be Edmund Randolph. The cabinet posts will be created, and we just look here again at those folks. There will be some bickering among the cabinet members, particularly Hamilton and Jefferson. They are going to become political enemies. One of the first things that the new government decides to do, and was promised at the Constitutional Convention, was a Bill of Rights. and this is going to be the number one priority when Congress convenes. Again, here shows a cabinet advising presidents on domestic and foreign policy. One of the things that the Anti-Federalists sharply criticized was the fact that the Constitution did not have a Bill of Rights to protect people from the federal government. States already had a Bill of Rights to protect citizens from the state government, but no Bill of Rights. And so they're going to make this a high priority. The way these Bill of Rights will be added is through amendments. There are two ways that you can amend the Constitution. The first is a constitutional convention requested by 2/3 of the states, but this has never happened. And then it has to be passed by a majority of the Senate and the House to agree to this. The way that all of our amendments have been done is 2/3 vote in both houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives, and then 3/4 of the states must approve it in order for a change to be made to the Constitution. One of the things that the Anti-Federalists were fearful of, again, was a powerful central government that might become tyrannical and take away the rights of individuals. So one of the things that will be drafted, James Madison drafts amendments and submits them to Congress. Madison's draft largely was based on George Mason's Bill of Rights from Virginia, so they copied that. The Bill of Rights, the first 10 adopted in 1791. We haven't had a lot of amendments to the Constitution because it is a difficult process. First Amendment to freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, petition. Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. Here's a picture of Madison, not only the author of the Constitution, but also the author of the Bill of Rights. Here shows the cover page for the Bill of Rights being introduced. Picture of the First Amendment, the freedom of religion, freedom of speech. Third Amendment said that you weren't obliged to quarter troops in your home unless you were paid and you agreed to it. This is one of those problems that the British put on the Bostonians when they forced them to quarter troops during the coercive acts. No unreasonable search and seizures, so they have to have a warrant to come into your house and search your home or your property. Every individual is guaranteed a right of trial, and you can't take a life, liberty, or property away without a trial. You have a right to a speedy and fair trial, so they can't lock you up for a long time and throw away the key. Right to civil cases against other citizens if you have been damaged in some way. No excessive fines and unusual punishments, no torture. Everyone is fined the same if there's going to be a fine. Here's the Second Amendment right there, the right to bear arms, to protect yourself, not only from foreign invaders, but also from the government if they become tyrannical. And you can see that the Founding Fathers were concerned about protection. And one way to protect yourself was to have a way to fight the government off. The Ninth Amendment, the people retain the rights not written in the Constitution. The 10th Amendment, all powers not delegated to the federal government are reserved to the states and people. And the reason that states take care of marriage license and driver's license, these would be some of these reserved powers. Another bill that was passed, this wasn't part of the Constitution in the sense that it was amended, but there was a bill, the Judiciary Act, passed in 1789. They realized that the Supreme Court had too many things to deal with, and so they're going to establish lower courts. Um, One of the things about the Supreme Court is that when it originally was put together, there were John Jay and 5 associates were the Supreme Court. And then they had lower courts, federal and district courts, circuit courts, to hear a variety of cases. And then also established the Office of Attorney General that will be added to George Washington's cabinet. Oliver Ellsworth of Connecticut is the one who came up with the Judiciary Act, and it gave Congress the power to create the lower courts. This is a picture of the Supreme Court. Hamilton will eventually become the first Secretary of Treasury, and his big problem is that we have a country that certainly is heavily in debt. And so he's going to figure out a way to pay off the debts and put us on a sound financial footing. So Alexander Hamilton is the man. In terms of blank is the money owed by the U.S. government to various lenders, this was called bonds. And the national debt is what we have today, which is approaching about $18 trillion. I don't know how much that is, but that seems like a lot. In terms of Alexander Hamilton's financial plan, you'll have to know this for the AP exam. His basic philosophy was help the rich. And if the rich are doing well, it will trickle down to other people in society. So he favored the rich, and he wanted a situation where they would be always in a position to make money. And that was part of his report on public credit in 1790. The report on manufacturing, he believed that we should promote a factory system in the United States and utilize our own resources and strengthen capitalism. This shows the report that was offered in 1790, the report on credit, favoring the rich. And here, the report on manufacturing, 1791. He believed that we should promote an industry within the nation and put on protective tariffs to keep out foreign goods, or at least raise them to a point where they were higher in cost than American goods. So there's going to be several components to his financial plan, but we'll stop here and pick that up next time in part 2.